Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tech Tips from CoopSys. I am Scott Stapps, the president of Cooperative Systems, and this week we're tackling something that every single one of us has to deal with day by day. We're constantly challenged with things and how to work smarter without making more work for ourselves. Most of us are wearing more than one hat, sometimes too many to count in a business, and you just can't get to everything all at once. So this will hopefully be helpful for you, and I really hope you will also find it worth sharing with your team. So how do we maximize our time and make the most out of our resources? How can I do more with less? Some of you may be expecting me to jump right into a list of technology tools or skills to boost productivity in this episode, but we really wanted to start with some fundamentals and hone in on some basic principles that will allow you to get more done in all parts of your life, including your business. That said, though, I don't want to ignore the whole world of useful technologies that can help you boost your productivity, and we'll definitely dive into some of those in an upcoming Tech Tips episode. It really deserves its own Tech Tips because it's extremely important to choose wisely when it comes to adding technology in or changing what you use to solve problems. And the process of determining what, the best fit has to happen before you jump in. So, here's just a quick high-level overview of what should be happening ahead of any tech or other resource challenges. You should be identifying the problems you're looking to solve first. From there, you can figure out what results you want that would require a change or addition of a tool or a resource or a process or whatever it might be that'll get you the desired result. Once that's all identified, that's when you can come up with the tasks and priorities that are going to be necessary in order to get you to the goal. Without the goal and without knowing what issues you're looking to address, it wouldn't be an informed decision, and you would be basically making a somewhat blind investment in something that may or may not end up solving a problem. It's going to be pretty tough to measure the return on investment knowing that also. So we definitely recommend you do the work first for the sake of your time, your energy, your resources, and your business's hard-earned assets. We can't just stop or turn back the clocks, and we can't always just hire more people or buy more tools or find a quick fix otherwise. But we can, however, take a look at how we're spending our time and what we're doing during those times and figure out what opportunities there may be for us to leverage what's available to us already and to improve our productivity. So that's why I want to look at some of the most fundamental concepts with you today that'll help you to be smarter and about how you're productive. These are meant to sort of walk you through where to start and how to approach your do more with less challenge so you can find a sustainable path that'll give you back time and resources. These are improvements for you personally that can in turn have a positive impact on your company's bottom line, issues like work efficiency, costs, and staying ahead of the competition. Let's start with the 80-20 rule. This is a concept that was developed by an Italian economist that who also happened to be an avid gardener. The story in that is gardening, he noticed about 20% of all his pea pods in his garden had 80% of all the peas in the entire garden. So that little section was thriving. When he further investigated and applied this to some examples in his country's economics, he figured out that 20% of the people in their entire country owned about 80% of the land. Ever since then, the 80-20 phenomenon, if you will, has been documented in hundreds of different examples, and many of those are cited in the business world. What it comes down to is this: about 80% of the results you're going to get from just about any undertaking in your business is likely to come from 20% of everything you put in. At first, this principle might be a little confusing. So, what are we saying here? That you should work less? No, this really has to do with time usage, actually. Pointing to the fact that you need to focus your efforts on areas that you can determine are making the greatest impact on progress towards the goal. You need to prioritize. That's really what it's about. Tackle the tasks or projects that you have identified as most worthy of your time and energy. How do you determine what those are is likely to be a unique combination of factors based on your specific business, your clients, and so on. This certainly doesn't mean you should ignore the other work on your plate. That stuff is still important, but based on this principle, they may just not be as worthy of the amount of time and effort and stress, namely, that they're asking of you. When it comes to managing your teams or projects, you'll have to identify what your goals are, obviously, before you can figure out how much time and effort needs to be allocated to those things. Once you do that, you can be more effective in divvying up the efforts to solve problems and get more things done that'll make a big impact. All right, so let's move on to the second item. 90 minutes. So you probably know about your circadian rhythm. It's the system that controls your sleep cycles over the 24 hours of any given day. But there are other cycles too that we experience naturally. And these are ultradian rhythms. These are 90 to 120 minute patterns that are found throughout the sleep cycles and waking hours, as it turns out. By taking natural breaks and carving up the day into parts, you're actually allowing yourself and your team to take advantage of the times of super focus that you naturally and will probably find to get more done during that time. Ignoring these shorter cycles that happen in the body is not a great strategy. Most of us were taught to, push through and handle it instead of giving your brain a break to get back to alert. I'm sure we've all heard that. Well, the decision about whether to allow for those natural breaks or whether you decide to power through all the stuff on your plate is obviously subjective. There are times when we absolutely have to persevere and keep the cogs turning, but science tells us that it always isn't a good idea for your health or for your business. Research also tells us that businesses actually lose hundreds of thousands of dollars a year due to what is referred to as Presenteeism, which is when your people are there, but not really functioning up to their capabilities or what their role may require. Every day, businesses lose money when workers are stressed out, not taking breaks, and not refocusing and recharging. So make the most of your time and your resources by honoring those natural breaks that are expected. You're likely to get more from yourself and out of your team this way. All right, so now let's talk about this next one, eat the frog. This one sounds a little strange, but once I explain, and you'll see how in a second how simple it is and how much it really makes sense. This is actually referring to something Mark Twain once said. If it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat two frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. The point he was trying to make here is that you should be tackling that big, daunting task head on first thing. A lot of times that thing is a thing you don't want to do, but absolutely have to do. So you got to stop procrastination, especially in the case of things that have to be handled and have some urgency to get to them. This again points back to the setting of your priorities. Put your things in order, get those critical things up to the top of the list and make sure they get handled before you take care of those lower consequence items. If you take on your to-do list with this in mind, you'll probably also find that there are some things that you have on your own plate that could actually delegate to someone and free up more of your time for those frogs at the top of the list. Okay, so we have the 40% statistic. We have this one on here because this is a very common misconception that we want to address. The common thought is that the more you do all at once, the more you'll actually be getting done. Unfortunately for you multitaskers, this is proving to be somewhat false. You might not be quite as efficient as you might think. The statistic here comes from psychology research that has been concluded that even small mental blocks that are created from jumping between tasks can cost you as much as 40% of a person's productivity time. So when you're multitasking, as you call it, you're actually just jumping really quick from one thing to another. Doing more than one or two tasks at a time, especially if they involve multiple steps or trains of your thought, that takes a big toll on your overall productivity. Our brains are able to facilitate things like walking and talking at the same time, but they are not super good at heavy-duty multi-thought processing. The basis for this conclusion that multitasking degrades your productivity are studies that studied what's called switching, which is where we jump from one task to another or we bounce between multiple tasks quickly. This sort of mental juggling depends on how familiar you are with the things you're doing, whether there's new information involved, how many different tasks, and so on. At high level, the results of these studies found that the switching results in lost productivity due to both the time and lower quality work in many cases. And as you can imagine, the less related tasks are, the more time and effort it takes to jump between them. So basically the theme here is the less interference, the better. If the tasks are related, there's less conflict between them, and you're probably doing a pretty good job at balancing that multitasking. But in many situations, that usually isn't the case. Just something to be mindful of when you find yourself kind of, between a bunch of things all at once in any given day. So now we're on to the last of these 4 principles, 12 out of 40. This one is a kind of super practical step that you can take in the business world and to make more out of people's time and efforts. Research tells us that every week people spend as little over 5 hours in meetings, or spend a little over 5 hours in meetings, and between 4 to 5 hours preparing for those meetings. A meeting is never just a meeting. You have to set up space or call for the room, identify the people involved, get their time reserved, those sort of logistics. But Then there's also the work that goes into preparing the material, the content for the meeting. Managers go above that and spend up to 12 hours in meetings in a given week. That number is even higher in the public sector. That's over 1 day out of the 5 days in any given work week. If you've got, say, 250 employees, you're looking at 47,000 hours a year in meetings for your business. That's a lot. And of all those, status update meetings themselves take almost 30% of all meetings in an average U.S. business employee's week. It would be incredible if it were true that all these meetings yielded tons of productivity, and that many of them actually are. But we know from a number of different sources that this is not always the case. Most of us know that from experience, right? All right, so meetings aren't going to go away, obviously. They're really important for collaboration and having people on the same page about projects and in progress items for your business. It's all about the teamwork aspect of the meeting being done, really. So how do you make your meetings more effective? First, you want to test the technology and tools you'll be using ahead of time so you're not wasting time in the meeting getting your content up on a screen or on the projector, etc. Second, make sure there's a specific formal agenda. The third, come up with notes from previous efforts that led to the meetings that you're building off of those and not guessing or starting from scratch. Next, make sure everyone's using the same tools to follow along and recording things during the meeting. Also have a visual to keep everyone engaged in the same way in the same place. Next, you need to take notes for the team and track progress on those items. And lastly, get feedback. What do people like and dislike about the meetings? Rate your meetings. Find out how to improve in your own business that works for your team. All right, so hopefully these have gotten you thinking about ways to make more of your time and what's available to you to be productive throughout the day. And maybe it can also translate into some positive changes for your whole team. Just to recap, these are the 5 simple ways to improve your productivity and work smarter day to day. First, prioritize. And when you do that, start by identifying the goal and work backwards to define what it takes to get there. Second, change the pace. Honor those natural breaks where we're all experiencing throughout the day, those 90 to 120 minutes we were talking about. Third, tackle the tough stuff. Identify the frogs and get those done first, especially if you're dreading them. Fourth, don't over multitask. Doing too much at once hurts productivity. And then last, host efficient, purposeful meetings. Respect your precious time and everybody else's for that matter, and make sure that your meetings are well defined and intentional. All right, so we hope that this episode has brought some light to some things you can be doing personally and things your team can be paying more attention to, all to be more productive day to day and have a real impact on your bottom line. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for the next episode of Tech Tips from CoopSys.